Good evening. I'm Aaron Imholt, host of the Steel Toe Morning Show on Rockin' 101, welcoming you to another weekly video. Now, the first couple of videos we did were political in nature, and that gets kind of pedantic, kind of boring. So I decided to switch video topics today into a realm that I'm also involved with, and that is the world of comedy, the world of entertainment. Some would say that the radio show I do is mildly amusing to some people. And I've been on stage for a few years now, even part of my own stand-up comedy tour. Doesn't mean you're good, by the way. It just means you're cheating and use your radio audience to siphon off so they buy your comedy show tickets. And then, of course, you have kind of a built-in laugh track. It's completely cheap. It's cheating, but it pays relatively well. So I decided we would tackle this issue because it seems to come up every few years. The constant battle, the ebb and flow, the struggle of political correctness versus comedy. Now, the problem with this argument is it usually devolves every single time into a straw man argument, meaning the one side will pick the worst example of one side and make that the case for absolutely everyone, framing the argument in a way that's beneficial to their cause. Comics do it. The PC speech police, as we call them, will do it as well. So how do we approach this argument? How do we approach this topic in a way that is as honest as possible? Well, ultimately, I can't divorce myself from the fact that I come down clearly on one side of this issue, but I'll try to keep the straw man arguments to a minimum by at least pointing out what some of them are. Number one, not all comedians are raging insensitive pricks, a bunch of cavemen in a male-dominated industry looking to just piss people off as much as we can. It's one of the straw men you see thrown out there. What we really want to do is, yes, from time to time push boundaries, and we can all pretend that we're Bill Hicks or George Carlin, but we're really not. We're guys out there jotting down notes on anything we can find, working it out at an open mic or working it out during an MC set, and then developing it into something we can use on a bigger show. Some of them work, most of them don't. We're not trying to change the world. We're not trying to be the edgiest guy ever. We're working within ourselves and slowly trying to grow. Sometimes we'll say something that's amazingly funny. We'll stumble upon a concept and we'll attack it from a direction that maybe it doesn't get attacked from that often. But most of the time, we'll stay within the same general wheelhouse that's been treaded over quite a few times. It's exciting when you go into a subject seen as taboo and you approach it from a different angle, but most of the time, you're just trying to make people laugh. And that's what people don't understand when it comes to this political correctness versus comedy argument. We're not politicians. I see a lot of people who come to shows, they get offended, or people who make YouTube videos like this asshole is doing right now, and they get offended and they think that they just went to the Nuremberg rally, forgetting that ultimately what we're trying to do is make jokes. If every time a comedian got up on stage and had everything he joked about taken as gospel, we'd never get a gig. Why? Because when we joke about things the way we do, or we approach a subject the way we do, we're taking it to the nth degree of ridiculousness. It's never something we'd put on a party platform or in a presidential campaign. Well, I guess Donald Trump coming along shatters some of that, but you understand the general point. So this idea that we're all making these statements and every joke has to have a kernel of truth in it is utter nonsense. You can do it, and when it works, it's great, but for the most part, you're trying to make money. And you make money by making people laugh, drawing money for club owners, getting the word out about yourself, and getting booked elsewhere. Now, the straw man that comedians create about the speech police is that they all just want to burn down comedy clubs, have language banned, and have us thrown in PC jail. No, some of them are just people who give a shit and don't want to see certain groups get maligned or certain groups get mocked. But again, that goes back to the whole, we're not making political statements. Sometimes we're just being silly. Sometimes we're just trying shit out. Some of it's going to work, some of it isn't. And that gets into point number 2, legit complaints versus strong-arming. Now, I know very few comedians who believe that critiquing a joke, criticizing a joke, or coming up to a comic after the show and offering their opinion or their viewpoint on how they saw the material, I know very few comedians who would get pissed at that. In fact, I know a few who actually enjoy the sparring match. They enjoy the verbal tete-a-tete. They enjoy the philosophical debate, if you will. Now, if you want to come up to a comic after a show and say, I really like that joke you told, and maybe you don't know, I had a situation, and God, it just really hit home, and Most of the time, 9 times out of 10, again, if we just talk to each other instead of make our own straw men and then tear them down on the way home from the club, if you go and talk to them, you're usually going to find some common ground. You're usually going to end up saying either, well, but it is comedy and I am trying to make people laugh and I have to deal with patterns and groups. I can't really deal with each individual in the crowd. It's kind of a big room. Or you're going to end up saying, you know what, I understand. And you know what, this gives me a new perspective to look at the material and perhaps it ends up changing. Or you could have just end up never going to that comedian's show again, going home and never returning. That's an option as well. I hear people say, well, what are we supposed to expect when we come into a comedy club? Jokes. You're supposed to expect jokes. Most comedy clubs will actually post the name of the comedian that's going to be performing, the headliner and the feature act. You can go online, go on YouTube, research them. In fact, you should. You should never go buy a ticket to somebody that you haven't looked at. Would you go see a musical act if you don't know if it's any good or not? Come on. You're spending your money. Know what you're going to expect, do your research, and don't make the comic responsible for whether or not you got offended. Sometimes it's just on you. But legitimate complaints are fine. There's nothing wrong with not liking a joke. Hell, if you liked every one of them, everyone would be doing this. It would be way too easy. The strong-arming is where the problem lies. When people have a problem with a joke and then prescribe a feeling to that comedian on his viewpoint in life just based on a silly joke he's maybe been working out or just tried for the first time, and then want to attack that person financially, calling clubs, telling them not to book them, or in the cases of really large names, trying to get their sponsors pulled from their TV shows, trying to get their videos taken off the internet, trying to get them kicked off of social media. None of this is productive. None of this is okay, and it doesn't make you a social justice warrior. It doesn't make you a good person. It doesn't make you honorable. It kind of makes you a piece of shit. A nosy, busybody, rude piece of shit. Imagine the hubris it takes to say, I didn't like a joke. I didn't laugh. I think this guy's a racist or a fascist or a communist or a sexist. Without talking to him, without having a debate, I want to see his financial well-being hurt. I want to see him harmed. That doesn't sound like the good guy to me. And comedians, maybe we do need to take it easy. Maybe we do need to assume that everyone critiquing our joke isn't out to burn down comedy clubs and throw us in politically correct jail, as I said before. But for the most part, no comic has ever objected to criticism or someone not liking them to the point where they would attack that person. But when you go after someone's pocketbook, well-being, or try to establish some boycott based on a quasi-offensive joke, you're kind of being a dick. A comedian I've performed with one time, Bill Squire, wrote a great semi-op-ed essay about this. He had a situation with a man who didn't like a joke he told. The man told him he didn't like the joke, waited till after the show, confronted him about it, and then left. And Bill Squire wrote one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. He said, I was mad for a second, and I'm paraphrasing, of course. I was mad for a second, but then I thought about it, and that's exactly what you should do. If you don't like a joke you heard, if you don't like a comedian, you just simply part ways, never to meet again. That's all. I don't see why this fight has to get started every 5-6 years in the first place. It seems like, and that brings me to point number 3, we can just have a nice clean separation. If you take a lot of different topics seriously and you're passionate about all of them and you don't feel they should be joked about, I know you don't like this answer, but maybe particular clubs and particular comedians aren't for you. It goes back to doing your research. If you see a guy and you look him up on YouTube and a lot of his stuff is edgy stuff about race or gender or things that just push a button within you, maybe you skip that show that night. Maybe you go out with your friends to a bar, you communicate with each other. Maybe you go see your parents for the first time in a while. Maybe you stay home with your wife and kids. I don't know. But maybe that show isn't for you. Not every show is going to be for you. Just don't make it about you in the end. So what do? How do we solve this? Well, the truth is we don't solve it. This will go on forever. This video won't make a dent. It won't make a difference. But hopefully we can inject a little bit of rationality into the discussion. Maybe there is no good guy. Maybe there is no bad guy. Maybe there's just you and me and we just disagree. Ugh. So number 1, let's stop with the straw men. There are no rules in comedy. You don't have to punch up. You don't have to punch down. You can joke about this. You can joke about that. There are no limits. There are no rules. That's why comedy exists. Number two, there are legitimate complaints, there are good ways to deal with it, and then there's strong-arming. Don't do it. And number three, if we still can't find a path to go down together at the end, there's nothing wrong with just having a clean break, separating. It's worked for many couples in the past. I'm Aaron Imholt from the Steel Toe Morning Show. I hope this is good. I hope this has worked. I hope it shed some light. I'm sure in the comment section it'll just devolve into a shitstorm straw man argument, but I'm trying my best. Subscribe, and we'll do videos every Friday. Thank you.